Friendship Tips is a film that's 10 times more terrifying than Hillbilly Teacher. It's based on the sensational Miss Beauty pageant stoning case in Thailand, which led to a tragic situation within a tragic situation, as horrific as it can possibly be. The main character, Shih-Keng, is an actress. However, unlike typical filming, she's pursued an extremely discreet acting career. Whenever there's a fatality in the city, the police reach out to her and request her to play the role of a dead body, aiding them in solving the case. The police would contact her and ask her to portray a corpse to assist in resolving cases, which included heinous acts like rape, abuse, murder, shooting, and other crimes that could shatter one's senses. The reporting process was so straightforward that it was astonishing, yet Shih-Keng needed to make money to support herself, and she wasn't in a position to refuse the job. Although the job paid well, it was considered a bit of a bad luck job. But how could one find peace with the ghosts of the deceased when tasked with playing the role of a corpse after someone had already passed away? To avoid being haunted by the spirits, she would kneel and burn incense at the spot where the deceased had died after every job. She would also burn incense at the place of death, ensuring the dead person's spirits could find peace. Most ghosts were reasonable. They knew Shih-Keng ate incense for a living and vanished. Her lively act made her popular, sought by police. She nearly died in a sensational case of a shattered body. Reports showed police rushed for a clue on the long-lost sister, Ame, missing from Thailand for 2.5 years. The following morning, Shih-Keng unexpectedly received a call from the police. During the call, the old man mentioned that every night, he could hear a woman's desperate cries for help coming from the room. Upon hearing this, the police officer felt a bit skeptical, so he leaned down against the door and listened very carefully. They followed the trail of blood leading to the bathroom, and to their utter shock, they discovered a dismembered body in the bathtub. The sight was so startling that the police officer screamed, but when he turned on the light, the bathtub was empty. He wondered if he was hallucinating. However, the fingerprints found on the bathtub confirmed that the deceased was indeed May. When Shih-Keng read about the murder in the paper, she smiled. May was a big star, and if she played his corpse, she might be a hit. But because it was a brutal case, the police worried Shih-Keng might be affected, so they chose a female officer for the role. Shih-Keng was disappointed but not ready to give up. She looked at May's picture and prayed for help to find the murderer, though she knew it was impossible. The next morning, Shih-Keng got a call from the police. After Shih-Keng finished her prayers, the policewoman, who was headed to the restroom, experienced something quite unusual. As she approached, the light at the entrance suddenly went out, and a ghostly figure began to emerge slowly from behind her. Feeling uneasy, the policewoman turned around to check, but saw nothing there. She assumed her vision was just blurred and dismissed it. However, at that moment, a piercing scream echoed, terrifying the policewoman to death, and Shih-Keng took her place. Later, to help Ame perfect her portrayal as a woman with a subtle smile, Shih-Keng watched her video and practiced diligently each night. Despite getting the actions right, she felt something was amiss and thought of giving up if she couldn't perfect it. But then, Ame's ghost appeared in the unseen realm, guiding Shih-Keng. When Shih-Keng opened her eyes, she was stunned by the sight. Yet, merely by turning around, Ame vanished instantly, disappearing from view. The more she struggled, the more hysterical they got. I realized May was secretly trying to help me, so I couldn't let him down. The picture seemed too perfect. She first stretched out her feet, then crouched and lay trembling. Little did she know, blood would suddenly gush from the tub. The scene of May's murder came to light, and in the end, Shih-Keng's face and neck would have to be removed, the body moved, and the car returned to its origin. Her face and neck. A long knife mark appeared on the bathtub, and her body was completely immobilized. When she finally managed to regain her senses, Ting desperately wanted to escape the scene. However, she suddenly heard the cries of a saint coming from behind her. There stood a woman in a hooked embrace, trembling uncontrollably, pleading with Ting to save her. Ting approached the scene, unaware that she was surrounded by the tormented souls of the victims. The ghosts, along with the selfish cries of the woman, were swirling around. As the girl screamed internally, the ghosts surged forward, including a woman named May, who encircled Ting with her pale hands. The more Ting struggled to break free, the more hysterical the ghosts became. Ting was so frightened that she got out of the bathtub. A few moments later, the difference between the two created a huge psychological gap between Lisa and May. She finally came to her senses and realized that what she had just dreamed of was a warning from May to remind her that the murderer was someone else, so she immediately dialed the phone to tell the police about it. However, Lao Wang didn't believe it and told Shih-Keng to stop talking nonsense. As Wang was in shock, a truck was coming up ahead of him, but he reacted in time so that he wouldn't be hit by the truck. It was only then that Wang finally realized that the dead man, Mui, was trying to get him to help him find the culprits, or else he would be the one to die. But the problem was that Mui's suspicions had been confirmed, and there was nothing he could do to change them, not to mention that Mui had admitted in the reconstruction of the scene that it was she who had cut her wife into pieces with her knife. As the case concluded, the police's suspense was relieved, and Shih-Keng could finally rest, even with more cases ahead. But Amy wasn't satisfied. She couldn't stand the murderer who had wronged her going free, so she haunted Shih-Keng constantly. Because of this, Shih-Keng sought guidance from a goddess. Soon, Amy manipulated her into writing the name Liza, Amy's best friend before birth, on paper. But why did May name her? There had to be a secret. That night, Shih-Keng went to Liza's place, and after investigating, she discovered Liza was May's murderer. Despite being best friends, Liza was jealous of May, a world star, while she was just a cosmetic surgeon. This difference created a huge psychological gap between them. Besides, since May became a star, she had no time for her, except for her work and family. The emptiness and loneliness were like a sharp knife, piercing Lisa's heart all the time, so she did what she had to do. Firstly, she had bewitched May, then she had knocked her off her feet, and finally, she had taken May's lighter and framed her for the murder. And now that Shih-Keng had found her here, Lisa had noticed that she looked quite similar to May, and her face inevitably reminded her of her. So she had no time to think of her, but she had no time to think of her. The face of Shih-Keng inevitably reminds her of the past. She still has a deep hatred for May, so she directly grabbed a knife and tried to kill Shih-Keng. Shih-Keng rushed to escape, but the door could not be opened. Luckily, at that critical moment, Lao Wang suddenly found the place and shot her several times, but she didn't know whether it was because of the shock or something else. Shih-Keng sat on the ground and didn't make a move. With the end of the case, the police's suspense was finally put to rest. Ting also gained popularity, and a horror movie crew noticed the chance and thought it would be unfortunate not to film such an unusual plot, so they decided to make it into a movie. However, oddly enough, there was no conclusion. In the few days after filming began, the scriptwriter passed away at his home, and the editing was drained by a dark shadow. Ting herself was heading home when she heard an eerie noise behind her, prompting her to cautiously turn around, only to see a frightening ghostly figure. She looked back again with caution and saw a terrifying apparition. Ting was so terrified that she fled, but as soon as she reached her home's door, the sound vanished. She paused, wondering if she was imagining things, and driven by curiosity, she slowly approached the door. But as soon as she peered through the cat's eye, Ting became hysterical, desperately trying to escape, then quickly ran to the balcony, believing she could flee from the ghostly figure. "Wake up!" But when she attempted to open the cupboard, it turned out to be just a nightmare. She went to the bathroom to wash her face, hoping to wake up, but when she looked in the mirror, she saw something terrifying once more. It was just another dream. Shih-Keng was so frightened that she found herself gasping for air and sweating heavily. Believing it was all because of May, she hurried over and burned 3 incense sticks for her, thinking this would help her escape from the ghost's hauntings. However, on the night of her return, Shih-Keng put on the crown and danced in an odd manner amidst the crowd until the camera's flash illuminated her, bringing her back to her senses and revealing the scene around her. Shih-Keng was bewildered as to how she ended up there in the first place. It wasn't until she touched the crown that she finally understood what was happening. When the Amy case had just concluded and the filming of the horror movie had only begun, the film crew had received a crown. This crown was both an anonymous sighting and an anonymous name, yet it was not a part of the film. Ting didn't know the address, so he placed the coffin in the warehouse. One evening, Ting went to the warehouse and stumbled upon the coffin by chance. After that, the entire cast and crew began to die in mysterious ways, and Shih-Keng started experiencing all sorts of bizarre occurrences. It now appears that it wasn't May's ghost, but rather another spirit lurking behind the crown. She saw the ghost again and saw her holding the crown of her head on Shih-Keng's head. It was at this moment that Shih-Keng's consciousness was taken over by the ghost, and he took Shih-Keng to an old house 800 miles away. It was then that Shih-Keng finally realized the truth behind the whole thing. Just as she had thought, it was not May but another ghost who had started all this. But he never imagined that this person would be his biggest fan, Mei, who had a dream of becoming an actress, just like Ting, but because of her mediocre looks and acting skills, she never had a chance to get ahead. She was not willing to give up, so she contacted a doctor who was trying to make herself look like Ting. He watched Ting's report while the doctor made a knife cut into his face, but shortly after the operation, he suddenly had a massive hemorrhage. Despite the doctor's desperate attempts to save him, Mei left this world filled with deep resentment and indignation. He firmly believed that Ting's appearance had led to his terrible fate. The man who was less than permanent even went so far as to throw Mei's body into the river after her death. Mei had endured so much suffering in life, and even after death, her body was submerged in the water day and night. How could her soul find peace? Over time, the place of her death became a significant source of powerful resentment, which lingered and haunted her crown constantly. Upon discovering the truth, Ting felt profound sympathy for Mei's tragic situation and promptly reached out to the police to recover her body. I believed all would be well. However, on that very night, as she was putting on her makeup, she once more caught sight of Mei's ghost. Alright, that concludes today's story. I am Yasser Arafat. Subscribe for more interesting horror videos. We look forward to seeing you again next time.